A man can buy an entire city block, but he cannot buy back 1 second. The second the woman he hasn't even met yet is about to die right in front of him. This is the story of Celia Vaughn and Lorenzo DeLuca, a social worker who survived the wrong kind of love, a mafia boss who never learned any other kind. Watch until the end and drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled. The rain came down like it had a grudge, not the soft, forgiving kind that washes a city clean and moves on. This was cold spring rain, mean and relentless, the kind that found every gap in a collar and every crack in a soul and pushed through anyway. Downtown Chicago wore it badly. The streets turned black and slick. Headlights scattered across wet pavement in long orange smears. Umbrellas inverted in the wind. People hunched their shoulders and moved faster, eyes down, wanting nothing more than to be somewhere else. Celia Vaughn had been wanting to be somewhere else for 7 months. She was 29 years old, 5'5", with dark circles under brown eyes that used to be warmer before exhaustion made a permanent home in them. She wore a charcoal wool coat 2 sizes too large, a deliberate choice, the kind of choice a woman makes when she has spent enough time being looked at in ways that make her skin crawl. And she carried a canvas bag overstuffed with case files that she should have left at the office. She hadn't left them at the office because going home meant being alone, and being alone meant listening for sounds outside her door. And she was so tired of listening. She moved through this intersection at Wacker in Michigan like she always did now. Head down, peripheral vision wide, tracking exits, tracking faces. The hypervigilance had become so woven into her daily existence that she barely noticed it anymore, the way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator until the moment it cuts out and the silence hits you like a fist. She noticed Travis Hale immediately. He was standing on the opposite corner, rain flattening his blonde hair against his forehead, his jaw set in the particular way it got when he had worked himself up about something. He was 32, broad-shouldered, good-looking in the way that had mattered to her once, a long time ago, before she understood what lived underneath it. He was holding a paper coffee cup that had gone cold. He wasn't drinking it. He was just holding it, watching her cross the street, and the stillness of him in the middle of all that movement and rain was more frightening than if he had been shouting. She knew he had been following her. She had known for weeks. She had told her supervisor. She had filed a police report that went nowhere. She had changed her commute 3 times, and he had found her 3 times. And every time she thought about calling the emergency number on the card buried in her wallet, something stopped her. The voice in her head that sounded like Travis saying, "You're overreacting. You're always overreacting. This is why people don't take you seriously." And she put the phone down and told herself she could manage it. She had not managed it. Celia. His voice cut through the rain and the traffic noise like he was standing right beside her, which was the thing about Travis. He had a way of collapsing distance, of making himself feel inescapable, and the worst part was that she understood it was a skill he had honed deliberately, over months, maybe years, maybe his whole life. She didn't stop walking. "Celia, I know you can hear me." She kept her eyes forward, adjusted the strap of the canvas bag on her shoulder, and continued toward the curb. The light was changing. She had maybe 4 seconds before she was across and on the other side, and could duck into the Walgreens on the corner and call an Uber from inside, which was the protocol she had built for exactly this situation. The quiet emergency protocol she had never told anyone about, because saying it out loud would mean admitting how bad it had gotten. He caught her arm at the curb, not violently. That was always how it started. Not violently, just firmly. Just the way a man grabs a woman's arm when he wants her to understand that her body is subject to his schedule, not her own. "I just want to talk." His fingers tightened. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Let go of me. Her voice was flat. She had practiced the flatness. The flatness was supposed to communicate disinterest, supposed to give him nothing to react to, supposed to de-escalate. Every book she had ever read on the subject, and she had read many, in the hollow hours between 2 and 4 in the morning, said to keep it flat. "You've been ignoring my messages. Let go of my arm, Travis." 47 messages, Celia, in 3 weeks. You couldn't respond to one of them? She tried to pull free. His grip didn't give. Around them, pedestrians moved past in both directions, heads down, umbrellas tilted against the wind, not looking. Nobody looked. She had learned that about cities, the larger they were, the more aggressively people practiced not seeing. Travis. She turned to face him because she had also learned that facing them sometimes helped, sometimes gave them the acknowledgement they were seeking and loosened the grip, sometimes bought her enough slack to get free. I didn't respond because there is nothing left to say. We are done. That is not going to change. Please let go of my arm and walk away. Something moved across his face. She had learned to read that movement, the way his expression shifted when the reasonable, measured version of himself lost the argument to whatever lived beneath it. She had seen it twice before. The first time, a kitchen cabinet had paid the price. The second time, her left forearm, though she had never entered that into any official report. You've been talking to someone, he said. His voice had changed register, lower, quieter. That was worse than the volume. I can tell. Someone's been filling your head with ideas about me. Who is it? Is it that woman from your office? The one with the... No one has been filling my head with anything. She pulled again, harder. This is me, Travis, just me, telling you to let go. The light changed. Walk signal. White pedestrian figure lit up, and the crowd around them surged forward into the crosswalk. And Travis moved with the crowd, but he moved wrong. He was focused on her face, not on where he was going, not on where she was standing, and when the surge of pedestrians jostled him from behind, his body torqued sideways, and his grip on her arm didn't release. It redirected, and for one fraction of a second his hand was at her back instead of her arm, and the surge hit him again, harder this time. A man twice his size in a gray parka not watching where he walked. And Travis stumbled forward and his palm connected with her shoulder blade, and she was at the curb and the push was enough. She went off the curb, into the street, into the oncoming lane. The headlights found her before her mind fully processed what had happened. Massive, white, expanding. The sound of the engine was a low roar that climbed fast into something physical, something she felt in her sternum before she heard it with her ears. And the rain on her face was suddenly very cold and very real, and the canvas bag was sliding off her shoulder, and she had time for one thought that wasn't even a complete thought, just a fragment, just the beginning of a name she didn't get to finish. The arm came from nowhere. Hard as iron, hooked around her waist from behind, yanked backward with a force that took her feet clean off the ground. The car, black SUV, going 40 in a 30 zone, blew past so close that she felt the displaced air move through her hair, and the horn was still screaming as it fishtailed in the wet and kept going, and she was on the sidewalk, both feet on concrete, heart slamming against her ribs like it was trying to exit through her chest. She became aware of several things in rapid succession. She was shaking. The arm was still around her waist. It belonged to a man standing directly behind her who was breathing evenly, unhurried, as if he had simply stepped around a puddle rather than pulled a woman out of the path of a speeding vehicle. She turned. He was tall, not just tall, but built in a way that made tall mean something, broad through the shoulders with the kind of physical presence that announced itself before a person spoke. Dark suit, clearly expensive, soaked through now from the rain and not apparently concerned about it. Dark hair. A jaw that looked like it had been set by someone who didn't believe in softness. He was, she estimated, somewhere between 35 and 40, and his face had the quality of a landscape that had seen weather. A scar ran along the left side of his jaw, thin and old, the kind that comes from something that happened a long time ago and was never quite forgotten. His eyes were gray. Not a warm gray. The gray of concrete in November. He was looking at her the way you look at something you've just pulled back from an edge, not with relief, with assessment. Are you hurt? His voice was low and direct, no excess in it. Celia realized she was still gripping his lapel with one hand. She released it. There was a wrinkle in the fabric where her fingers had been. No, she said. No, I don't think so. He looked past her. She followed his gaze. Travis was still on the sidewalk 12 feet away, and his face had gone the color of old chalk. He was staring at the man behind her with an expression she had never seen on him before. She had seen Travis angry, condescending, manipulative, charming, wounded, and rageful. She had not, until this moment, seen him frightened. He pushed you, the man said. Not a question. It was an accident, Travis said too quickly. His voice had gone up half a register. She slipped. The curb was wet. I wasn't talking to you. Still not looking at Travis, still looking at her. Did he push you? Celia opened her mouth, and the practiced answer was there, the one she had been giving for 7 months. The "it's complicated" and the "I don't want to make things worse" and the "it's really not as bad as it looks." She felt them line up on her tongue, dutiful and familiar. She looked at the wrinkle she had left in his lapel. She thought about the 47 messages. She thought about the kitchen cabinet and her left forearm and the sound of her own footsteps when she changed her commute for the third time. "Yes," she said. "He pushed me." Something shifted in the man's expression. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it. She didn't miss it. She had spent years learning to read faces, and she did not miss the way his eyes went still and flat and focused, the way a camera shutter closes for a fraction of a second, and then the expression was gone, and there was nothing on his face except the same measured calm as before. He turned to look at Travis for the first time. Whatever Travis saw in that look made him take one step backward. Just one. He probably didn't even realize he had done it. "Walk away," the man said. Quiet. Absolute. "She's my—" "I won't say it again." Travis looked at Celia. His jaw worked. She could see him doing the calculation, could see him measuring the situation and finding the arithmetic unfavorable. And she watched him make the decision she had spent months hoping the legal system would force him to make. To turn around, to walk, to put distance between himself and a confrontation he couldn't win. He did it without grace, pulling his collar up and shoving his hands into his pockets, and the crowd absorbed him, and he was gone. Celia became aware that she was still shaking. "There's a coffee place," the man said, and gestured with his chin at a place across the street. "If you need to sit down." "I'm fine," she said, which was clearly untrue. Her hands were trembling. One of the case files had escaped from the canvas bag and was somewhere on the wet sidewalk, pages absorbing water, ruined. He looked at her hands. He didn't comment on them. He crouched down and collected the file, shook the water off the cover, and held it out to her. She took it. "Thank you," she said. For all of it." "Don't thank me. You just pulled me out of traffic." "Yes." "That's—" She stopped. Tried to locate a version of herself that was functional. "That's not a small thing. It wasn't a large decision." He reached into the inner pocket of his soaked jacket and produced a business card. White. Simple. A name in clean type. Lorenzo DeLuca. A phone number beneath it. Nothing else. No title. No company. Just the name and the number, which somehow communicated more than a paragraph of credentials would have. He held it out. "If he comes back, call that number." She took the card. "Not the police?" she asked. Something that might have been the earliest stage of a smile moved across his face. Not humor exactly. Something drier. "Call me first." Then he turned and walked back into the rain, and the crowd swallowed him the way the crowd had swallowed Travis, except that somehow he made the crowd feel smaller rather than larger. And she stood there on the wet sidewalk with a ruined case file in one hand and a business card in the other, and her heart was still doing something architectural against her ribs, and she wasn't sure how much of it was the near death and how much was something else she didn't have a name for yet. She turned the card over, nothing on the back, just white. She put it in her coat pocket, pressed her palm flat against it for a moment through the fabric. Then she picked up the rest of her scattered files, shouldered the canvas bag, and walked the 14 blocks home in the rain because she didn't trust her hands to type an Uber address without shaking. She did not sleep well that night. She didn't sleep well most nights. The apartment was a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building on Dearborn that had good locks and bad heating, and a landlord who responded to maintenance requests with the urgency of a man who believed that urgency was a character flaw. Celia had chosen it specifically because it was on the 3rd floor, hard enough to access from outside that a man who had once, in a very different apartment, stood in the parking lot at 2 a.m. throwing pebbles at her window would find the logistics discouraging. That had been 6 months ago. She had moved twice since then. She made tea she didn't drink, sat on the couch in the coat she hadn't taken off, and looked at the business card propped against the base of her bedside lamp. Lorenzo DeLuca. She had typed the name into her phone browser 3 times and deleted it 3 times. The 4th time, she let it run. The search results were not what she expected, and she was not a woman easily surprised. He was, according to the results, 41 years old. A billionaire, though the exact figure varied by source, and tended to be described with the kind of careful vagueness that suggested the real number was either much higher or much more complicated than a single figure could contain. Hotels, shipping, commercial real estate. His name was on 3 buildings she walked past regularly without having ever registered it. His company, DeLuca Holdings, was headquartered 2 miles from her apartment. He sat on the boards of 2 arts organizations and 1 hospital. He had given a brief, somewhat combative interview to a financial magazine 4 years ago and had not given another one since. There were also other results, buried a few pages down on sites that ranged from credible to conspiratorial. His father's name linked to a federal investigation that had concluded without charges 15 years ago. Associates with last names that appeared in other contexts, other investigations, other buried pages. A photograph from a charity gala in which Lorenzo DeLuca stood at the edge of a crowd of well-dressed people and looked like the only person in the room who knew exactly where all the exits were. She read for 2 hours. Then she turned the phone face down, lay back on the couch, and stared at the ceiling. She was a social worker. She had a master's degree and a caseload of 43 families and a supervisor who cared, and a career she had built methodically in the years after her own difficult adolescence, because she had made a decision at 19 that her history would be a qualification, not a life sentence. She knew what danger looked like. She knew it was not always ugly. She knew it wore expensive suits and pulled women out of traffic and handed out business cards with nothing on them but a name and a number. She also knew what the alternative looked like. The alternative was 47 messages. The alternative was a kitchen cabinet. The alternative was standing at a curb in the rain waiting for the arithmetic to come out in her favor and discovering with great clarity that it had not. She picked up the card. She did not call the number. She kept the card. Travis called her 6 times the following morning before 8 a.m. She didn't answer. She sat at her desk at the office, in the open floor plan with the fluorescent lights that hummed at a frequency that made her right eye twitch, and she worked through her caseload with the focused determination of someone using work as a form of self-defense. Mrs. Okafor in Pilsen, whose landlord was trying to displace her. The 3 siblings in Logan Square, whose case needed to go back to the judge. The teenager in Uptown who had started missing school again and whose home situation needed another visit, carefully timed, carefully managed. She was good at her job. This was not incidental to her character. It was foundational. In the years when she had struggled to organize her own life, her professional competence had been the scaffold she climbed to get back upright. She held on to it now with the same grip. Her supervisor, Deb, stopped by her desk at 10:30 with coffee she hadn't asked for and the expression of a woman who had something to say and was deciding how to say it. "You look like you slept in your car," Deb said. "I slept fine." "You look like you slept in a car that was also on fire." Deb set the coffee down. She was 54 with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses she wore pushed up on her forehead at all times, available for rapid deployment like emergency equipment. "The report you filed last month. About Travis." Celia's jaw tightened, which was involuntary and annoying. "What about it?" "I'm asking because I care, not because I'm auditing you." Deb pulled up a chair, which meant this was not a conversation she was planning to stand through. "Has it gotten better or worse?" A pause that said everything. "Worse," Celia said. "Tell me." She told her. Not everything. She edited the intersection out of it, extracted Lorenzo DeLuca entirely from the account, left the story as, Travis confronted her again. It escalated. She got away. Deb listened with the specific quality of attention that had made her an excellent social worker before she became an administrator, the kind that didn't rush to fill silences and didn't reach for solutions before the whole problem had been laid out. "You need an attorney," Deb said when she finished. "A restraining order. A real one, with teeth." The last one was inadequate. There are attorneys who specialize in exactly this situation. I can get you 3 names by end of day. Celia looked at her coffee. "Okay," she said, "and I need you to tell me that you have somewhere safe to be." "I have my apartment, which he knows the location of. I changed the locks." She had changed them twice. Deb's expression was the expression of a woman who knew that changing locks and being safe were not the same proposition and was deciding how hard to push. "Celia, I'm managing it." "I know you're managing it. You've been managing it for 7 months and you're getting thinner and your right eye is doing that thing it does." Deb had worked with her long enough to know about the eye. Managing it is not the same as being okay. Celia didn't have an answer for that. She drank the coffee instead. The three names Deb sent her were good. She knew they were good because she spent her lunch break researching them, and one of them, a woman named Patricia Soule, who ran a small firm in the West Loop, had a track record on stalking and harassment cases that was, by any reasonable measure, exceptional. She drafted an email to Patricia Soule's office and saved it to drafts and looked at it for a while. Then she looked at the business card again, which she had transferred from her coat pocket to her wallet that morning without quite deciding to. She did not call either number that afternoon. What she did instead was take the long route home, through the park, past the lake, in the cold wind off the water, partly because she liked the lake, and partly because open space meant sightlines, and sightlines meant she would see Travis coming before he reached her. The lake was gray and choppy under the overcast sky, same color almost as Lorenzo De Luca's eyes, which was an observation she immediately decided to set aside. She made dinner, pasta with whatever was in the refrigerator, which wasn't much. She ate at the counter because the table was covered in case files. She watched half of a documentary about something she couldn't focus on and gave up. She checked her phone. 2 more calls from Travis, a voicemail she deleted without listening, 3 texts she read. The texts were not overtly threatening. They never were, in writing. Travis was careful in writing. He had always been careful in writing, she suspected, because some part of him understood that words left evidence. The text said, "I need you to understand that yesterday was not what it looked like." And then, "I would never hurt you. You know that." And then, after a gap of 40 minutes, "I'm worried about you spending time with people you don't know. That man yesterday. Who is he? You don't know anything about him." She set the phone face down on the counter. She thought about the 41 results pages on Lorenzo De Luca. She thought about the way Travis had taken one step backward. She pulled the card out of her wallet and held it in both hands, turning it over the way she had the night before. And then she set it on the counter next to her phone and looked at both of them for a while. And then she washed her dinner dishes and went to bed. It was 3 weeks before she called the number. In those 3 weeks, several things happened. The restraining order application went through and then stalled and then was contested by Travis's attorney on grounds that were technically arguable and practically enraging. And the result was a process that was moving but moving the way continental drift moves, in a direction she needed but at a pace that felt designed to exhaust her. Travis, meanwhile, was not constrained by the pace of legal processes. He showed up at the coffee shop near her office on a Tuesday morning. He was there when she arrived, and he was there when she left, and she walked past him both times without speaking, hand steady, face composed, heart doing the thing it did, and went directly back to her office and called Patricia Soule and described it in clinical detail, and Patricia said, "Document everything, date and time, photograph if you can, call me if he makes contact." He made contact the following Friday, not at the office, at the grocery store on her block, which meant he knew which grocery store she used, which meant the new route she had taken home 3 times had been observed at least once. He materialized at the end of the cereal aisle, and he wasn't threatening, wasn't loud, wasn't anything that the other people in the cereal aisle would have found remarkable. He said her name. He said, "I just want 5 minutes." He said, "I miss you, Celia. I miss you so much it's making me sick." And his voice had that particular rough quality it got when he was genuinely distressed. Not performed distress. Actual distress. And she had known him long enough to tell the difference, and the difference did not help her because the thing about loving the wrong person is that the love doesn't disappear just because the person is wrong. It just becomes another thing to manage, another weight. She said, "Travis, if you contact me again, I'm calling my attorney." She left the cereal aisle without her cereal. She walked home carrying 2 bags that didn't include cereal, and she put everything away with methodical precision, and then she sat at the kitchen table and took out the business card and called the number. It rang twice. De Luca, 1 word. His own name, delivered with the efficiency of a man who received calls that mattered and had learned to lead with identification rather than pleasantry. "This is..." She stopped, reorganized. "This is Celia Vaughn. We met 3 weeks ago, at the intersection. You..." "I know who you are," he said. No surprise in it, as if he had been expecting the call, or as if he retained all information once acquired and needed no refresher. "Are you safe right now?" "Yes, right now, yes, I just..." She looked around her kitchen, the case files on the table, the cereal she hadn't bought. I'm not sure how to... Where are you? She told him her address. A pause. Brief, measured. I'll come to you. Give me 20 minutes. You don't have to Give me 20 minutes, he said again, and ended the call. She looked at the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she got up and tidied the kitchen table because she was going to have a guest, and the kitchen table was covered in case files. And she was aware with some exasperation that she was concerned about the appearance of her kitchen table at a moment when she arguably had larger concerns, but the tidy table gave her hands something to do while she waited, and her hands needed something to do. He was there in 18 minutes. He was wearing a different suit, dark charcoal, equally expensive, and he was alone, no driver visible, which surprised her. He stood in her doorway and looked at the apartment with a brief, comprehensive scan that she recognized as professional rather than personal, cataloging exits and sightlines in a way that mirrored exactly what she did every time she entered an unfamiliar space. Tell me, he said, what's been happening? So she told him. All of it, this time. Not the edited version she had given Deb, the actual version, the 47 messages, the cereal aisle, the legal process that was moving like continental drift, the text that said, "Who is he? You don't know anything about him." She told it without embellishment and without minimization, in the flat, precise language she used with clients when she needed them to understand the exact shape of a problem, and he listened the way he had listened at the intersection, without trying to fill her sentences, without reaching for solutions before the whole problem was laid out. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Your restraining order," he said. "Who's handling it?" "Patricia Soul." "Good attorney." He said it with the authority of someone who had direct knowledge rather than hearsay. "Let her work. Don't negotiate with him directly." "I know that." "I know you know it." A pause. "Do you have family here?" "No." "Friends who know the situation?" "My supervisor. A few people?" She paused. "Not many." He nodded. No judgment in it. Just data, filed away. He stood up and she became aware again of the way space reorganized itself around him, the way it had at the intersection. Not aggressively, just as a physical fact. "I'm going to have someone watch the building for the next few days," he said. "You won't see them. They won't interfere with anything. They're there so you don't have to track exits by yourself for a while." She stared at him. "I can't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask me." He moved toward the door. "Call me if he makes contact. Not Patricia. Me first." "You keep saying that." He turned at the door and looked at her. The gray eyes. The old scar. The face that had been through weather. "Because the law is slow," he said simply. "And he isn't." He left. She stood in her kitchen for a long time after the door closed, and for the first time in 7 months, the hum of the refrigerator didn't sound like something she needed to track. She slept that night. Not well. But she slept. She saw him again 4 days later. Not because she called him. He called her, mid-morning, his voice carrying the same stripped economy as always, asking if she had time for coffee. She said yes before she thought about whether yes was wise. They met at a place in the West Loop that was quiet and well-lit, and staffed by people who seemed to know him without making a production of it. A table was available immediately, the coffee arrived without ordering, and nobody hovered. She brought a case file by accident, a habit. She rarely went anywhere without one. He noticed it but didn't comment, and somehow that was more disarming than asking would have been. They talked for 2 hours, not about Travis, about work, hers, mostly because he asked questions with the particular quality of someone who was genuinely curious rather than performing curiosity, about the families she worked with, about the gaps in the system she spent her professional life navigating. He listened in the way she was coming to understand was simply how he listened, completely, without the divided attention most people brought to conversations. Occasionally he asked a question that cut to the center of something she had been circling, the kind of question that made her realize he had heard not just what she said, but the shape of what she hadn't said. At one point, she asked him about his work. He gave her a version of it, the hotels, the shipping, the real estate. She let the version sit for a moment and then said, "And the rest of it?" He looked at her. "I looked you up," she said. After the intersection, I'm not, she stopped, started again. I'm not naive. I know what I found. He was quiet for a moment, and in that moment she felt the conversation at a genuine hinge point, the kind where the next sentence would determine the shape of everything after it. Then you know, he said finally, what I am. I know some of it. It's enough. She held his gaze. Is it? He didn't answer that directly. Instead, he said, I'm not going to tell you it's not what you think, because you're clearly someone who thinks correctly. I'm not going to tell you there's nothing dangerous about what I do, because that would be an insult to your intelligence. He paused. What I can tell you is that you are not in danger from me. That's exactly what a dangerous person would say. Yes, he agreed. It is. She thought about this. She thought about the 47 messages and the restraining order moving like continental drift, and the fact that for 4 nights she had slept because she was not tracking exits by herself. Why are you helping me? She asked. He thought about the question with the seriousness it apparently deserved. Because you were honest at the intersection, he said. When I asked, you could have given me the easy answer. You didn't. She picked up her coffee cup. That's it? That's enough. She looked at him across the table. The scar, the gray eyes, the suit that fit a man who had decided precisely how he wanted to present himself to the world and had the resources to execute that decision with complete fidelity. She thought about the phone with 47 messages on it. She thought about the cereal aisle. She thought about standing at a curb in the rain and the moment the headlights found her and the heartbeat that might have been her last. She thought about sleeping. Okay, she said. Okay, what? Okay. She set the cup down. Tell me something else. Something shifted in his face. Not the camera shutter thing this time. Something slower. Something that moved through his expression the way light moves through water. He told her something else. And then she told him something back. And 3 hours later, she walked out into the West Loop afternoon, and her canvas bag was over one shoulder, and she had not thought about Travis Hale for the last 40 minutes, which was the longest stretch in 7 months. And she stood on the sidewalk outside the coffee place and breathed the cool spring air and felt something in her chest that was not exactly calm, but was adjacent to it, and she didn't know what to call it yet. She got out her phone. There were 2 missed calls from Travis, and 1 new text sent 41 minutes ago while she had not been thinking about him. I know you're seeing him. I know who he is. You have no idea what you're doing, Celia. You have no idea what he's capable of. She read it twice. Then she called Lorenzo. He answered on the first ring. He's been watching the coffee place, she said. A pause. 1 beat. I know, he said. I saw him. Her blood went cold. You knew he was there and you didn't... I needed to know how far he'd follow you. His voice was even. Now I know. That is not... She stopped. Controlled herself. Controlled herself because losing control was a luxury she didn't have, and because she was furious, and because underneath the fury was something else. Something that recognized, against her better judgment, the calculus of it, the cold strategic patience of a man who gathered information before he acted, who ran the arithmetic all the way to the end before he moved. Are you angry? He said. Obviously. Good. And there it was again, that thing at the edge of his voice. Stay angry. Anger is useful. Fear isn't. A pause. Go home. Lock your door. I'll call you this evening. She stood on the sidewalk, the spring air, the city noise. Lorenzo. First time she had used his name, she heard it land, heard the slight shift in the quality of the silence on his end. Yes. What are you going to do? The pause that followed was long enough to be its own kind of answer. I'm going to make sure, he said quietly, that he runs out of places to follow you. She should have pushed back. She should have cited the legal process, Patricia Soule, the restraining order moving like continental drift toward the resolution that was technically, procedurally, correct. She should have said that this was not how problems were supposed to be solved. She said none of that. Okay, she said. And when she got home, she locked her door, and she did not hear footsteps in the hallway the way she usually did, but she heard something else. The quality of silence that exists when someone has made a decision, and that decision has weight, and it is moving, somewhere out in the dark city, toward something she could not yet see but had already, against every reasonable instinct she possessed, decided to trust. The call came at 9:47 that evening, exactly when he said it would. She was sitting on her couch with a case file open across her knees that she hadn't read a single word of since she sat down 2 hours ago. The television was on, with the sound muted, a habit she'd developed sometime in the last 7 months, background movement without background noise, because noise masked footsteps and she couldn't afford to mask footsteps. When her phone lit up with the number, she picked it up before the first ring finished. "He won't be outside your building tonight," Lorenzo said. She waited for more. There was no more. "What does that mean?" she said. "It means what it means." "Lorenzo." She set the case file aside. "I need you to tell me what you did." A pause. She was learning his pauses, the way each one had a slightly different texture. This one was not evasive, it was deliberate, a man choosing his words with the same precision he applied to everything else. "I had a conversation with him," he said finally. "A private one." "That's all you're going to tell me." "That's all you need to know." She pressed the heel of her hand against her forehead. The frustration was real and physical, a tightness behind her eyes. "You understand that I can't—" She stopped, started again. "I work in child welfare. I testify in court. I'm an officer of the system you just went around, Lorenzo. I can't be someone who doesn't ask questions." "You can ask questions." His voice was even. "I'm telling you the answer." "The answer isn't an answer. The answer is that you'll sleep tonight." She sat with that for a moment. The television screen showed a nature documentary, something about deep ocean, silent creatures drifting through black water. She watched it without seeing it. "He's not gone," she said. "Whatever you did tonight, he's not going to disappear because of one conversation." "No," Lorenzo agreed. "He's not." "So what's the plan?" "The plan is the same. Patricia Soul. The legal process. You document everything. You stay close to your routine and you don't engage with him directly. And you." Another pause. Different texture. This one had something in it she couldn't classify yet. "I'm here," he said. "That's the plan." She thought about pushing further. She thought about the attorney, the restraining order, the continental drift. She thought about the fact that she was sitting on her couch at 10 o'clock at night with a case file she hadn't read and a television she couldn't hear, and that for the first time in a week, the sound of a door in the hallway didn't make her shoulders climb toward her ears. "Okay," she said, get some sleep." "I'm not a client," she said. You don't have to manage me." A beat. Then, "I know." And he ended the call. She sat there for another minute, phone in her hand, and thought about the way he said, "I know." Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I didn't mean it that way," just "I know." Direct acknowledgement without the apology that would have been hollow. She thought that most people, when caught managing someone they shouldn't be managing, would have reached for the apology. He hadn't. She was not sure if that was respect or arrogance, and she was not sure the distinction mattered as much as it should have. She slept. Travis called her twice the next morning, which told her that whatever Lorenzo's private conversation had accomplished, it had accomplished something temporary. She forwarded both calls to Patricia Soul's office with timestamps and call logs the way she had been doing for 3 weeks, building the paper architecture of a case that would eventually hold. The day was busy in the specific grinding way her days had been busy lately. The kind of busy that wasn't the productive, meaningful busy of actually helping people, but the administrative busy of managing a system that needed constant negotiation. She had a hearing for the Logan Square siblings that got postponed 20 minutes before it was supposed to start because the judge was running 2 hours behind. She had a home visit in Pilsen that ran long because Mrs. Okafor was having a bad week and needed someone to sit with her, not just check boxes. And Celia was constitutionally incapable of not sitting with people who needed someone to sit with them. She ate lunch at her desk at 3:30 in the afternoon, which was not lunch so much as a granola bar, and bad coffee consumed simultaneously while typing. Deb stopped by at 4. Patricia Soul's office called. The restraining order hearing is set for the 14th. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Deb pulled up the chair again. This was becoming a pattern. "How are you?" "I'm fine." I'm going to need a more detailed answer than that. Celia looked up from the screen. Deb was watching her with the particular quality of attention she usually reserved for case reviews. Quote, thorough, patient, not going anywhere. I'm managing, Celia said, better than last week. What changed? A pause. I called someone. Deb waited. Someone who's been, she chose the word carefully, helpful. The man from the intersection. Celia's expression must have shifted because Deb said immediately, you mentioned him when you told me what happened. You edited him out of the rest of the story, but you mentioned him at the intersection. She leaned forward slightly. Who is he? It's complicated. Celia. Deb's voice had dropped the administrative register and gone back to the one she used on home visits. The one that said, I'm not here to evaluate you. I'm here with you. I'm not your supervisor right now. I'm asking as someone who's known you for 4 years. Who is he? Celia told her. Not everything. She didn't know enough of the full picture to tell everything, but the shape of it, the business card, the calls, the man watching the building, the private conversation with Travis whose content she still didn't know. When she finished, Deb was quiet for long enough that the fluorescent light above them completed several full cycles of its low, irritating hum. You understand, Deb said carefully, what his reputation implies. Yes, and you're... She stopped, started again, more carefully. How are you thinking about this, Celia? Not as a social worker, as yourself. The question sat there. Celia looked at it directly. I'm thinking that the legal process has had 7 months, and he's still finding me in grocery stores, she said. I'm thinking that last night I slept 5 consecutive hours for the first time since February. I'm thinking... She stopped. I'm thinking that I know it's complicated. I know what I'm doing has edges. I'm not confused about that. But you're doing it anyway. Yes. Deb looked at her for a long moment. Then she sat back and took off her reading glasses and cleaned them, which was the thing she did when she was processing something difficult that she had decided to accept rather than argue with. Okay, she said. Then be careful. That's all I'm going to say. Be careful and keep Patricia Soul in the loop on everything that can be in the loop. I know. And Celia. She stood up, replaced the glasses on her forehead. The fact that one person makes you feel safer doesn't mean the situation is safe. Those are different things. Celia looked at her screen. I know that too, she said. Poti. She didn't see Lorenzo again until the following Tuesday. He texted the morning of, Are you free at 7? And she replied yes with the speed of someone who had already been thinking about whether he would ask. They met at a restaurant in River North that was quieter than it should have been for a Tuesday, which she later understood was not a coincidence, that the kind of man Lorenzo DeLuca was could arrange for a restaurant to be quieter than it should be without anyone remarking on it. The food was exceptional. She barely tasted it. What she remembered afterward was the conversation. He told her, that night, without being asked, about his father. Not the federal investigation. She already knew the outline of that. The man, Arturo DeLuca, who had built the organization from a different era's raw materials, and had not been a gentle person, and had not raised a gentle son, and had died 7 years ago of a heart attack in the study of a house in Lincoln Park that Lorenzo now owned but did not live in. Why don't you live there? She asked. Because it's his house, Lorenzo said. Simple as that. Not angry, not sad. Just a fact he had settled into long ago. She thought about what it meant to carry a father like that. She thought about her own history, which she did not share that night, but which sat beside her at the table like a third party who had come uninvited and stayed anyway. The organization, she said. Is it what you run now? Is it different from what your father ran? He held her gaze. Different enough, he said. That's not really an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. She had a glass of wine she was working through slowly, rationing it the way she rationed things that might lower defenses she'd spent 7 months reinforcing. I'm not asking because I'm judging, she said. I'm asking because I want to understand who I'm... She stopped. Who you're what? He said. She looked at the wine glass. Who I'm spending time with. He was quiet for a moment. The organization runs protection, logistics, and negotiation across 4 districts of the city, he said, with the measured evenness of a man reciting facts he had long ago made peace with. Violence is a tool of last resort, not routine management. I have never ordered anything done to anyone who was not already operating within the same framework. The people who work for me know what they signed on for. So do I. She processed this. And the law looks the other way on some things, doesn't look the other way on others. I know exactly where those lines are. And you stay on your side of them. A pause. Not always, he said. But I know when I cross. It was the honesty that disarmed her. Not the content of it, but the directness. She had sat across from Travis Hale for 18 months and had never once received a direct answer to a direct question, had been given performances and deflections and gentle reframings that made her feel like she was losing her mind for asking. Lorenzo De Luca gave her answers that were incomplete but were never dishonest, and in the current economy of her life, that was a form of wealth she had not expected and did not know how to account for. She told him that night about her adolescence, a little of it, the edges of it. The things she usually kept behind glass, labeled and archived, useful for her professional context and unavailable for anything personal. She told him that she had grown up in a house where violence was also a tool of last resort in theory and a more frequent tool in practice, and that she had left at 17 and put herself through school and built, methodically and deliberately, a life that looked nothing like the one she came from. He listened. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." He said, "That's why you're good at it, the work." Yes. And why you stayed with him as long as you did. She looked up. The observation had been precise and unsentimental, and she felt the accuracy of it land somewhere between her shoulder blades like pressure applied to an old bruise. "Yes," she said, "that's not a weakness." "I know." "Say it like you know it." She met his gaze. "I know," she said, with different weight. Something moved in his face again. She was cataloging these movements. This one was the slow one, the light through water, and it was becoming associated in her internal index with moments when she said something that reached him in a place he hadn't expected to be reachable. They walked out into the River North night after, not quite together, not quite separate. He walked her to where her Uber would meet her, 2 blocks, and at the corner he stopped and she stopped and neither of them filled the space immediately. "I think you should know," he said, "that this is unusual. For me." She looked up at him. "What is?" He made a slight gesture that seemed to indicate the general situation. The walk, the restaurant, the conversation, the catalog of honest answers he had given to questions he didn't have to answer. "This," he said. She thought about Deb's voice. The fact that one person makes you feel safer doesn't mean the situation is safe. She thought about sleeping. "For me too," she said. The Uber arrived. She got in. When she looked back through the window, he was still standing at the corner, watching the car go. And he looked, for the first time since she had known him, like a man without a plan. Travis showed up at her building on a Thursday night 3 days later. She heard the buzzer at 10:14 p.m. She knew it was him before she answered the intercom, the same way she knew. The way the body knows things before the brain signs off on them. Some old animal intelligence operating just below the level of conscious thought. She stood in her kitchen and looked at the intercom panel on the wall and breathed. She called Lorenzo before she answered. He picked up on the second ring. "He's at my buzzer," she said. "Don't answer it. I'm 20 minutes away." She didn't answer the buzzer. She stood in her kitchen with her phone in her hand and listened to it ring 3 more times, and then the ringing stopped, and she went to the window that had a partial view of the street below, and she could see the top of his head, the familiar blonde hair, the familiar set of his shoulders when he was working himself up about something. He was pacing. He was on his phone. Her phone lit up. "Travis." She declined it. She texted Lorenzo. "He's on the street outside, pacing." Lorenzo replied, "Stay away from windows." She stepped back from the window. Travis buzzed again, held it. The sound was continuous, a single sustained tone, which was worse than intermittent because it had the quality of a person who had decided that enough was enough, that patience had expired, that the rules of reasonable human behavior were someone else's problem tonight. Then her phone rang from a number she didn't recognize. She stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Ms. Vaughn." A man's voice, not Travis. "Mr. Hale would like a word." She felt cold move through her. Not the cold of temperature, the other kind. "Who is this?" she said. "A mutual acquaintance." Mr. Hale is concerned about your safety given your recent associations. Put me through to Patricia Soul, she said. Anyone else who calls this number should expect to be reported. A pause. Ms. Vaughn, Mr. DeLuca is not a man you should be accepting favors from. This conversation is over. You don't understand what he... She ended the call and immediately called Patricia Soul's emergency line and reported it. The time, the number, the exact words. The fact that Travis had apparently located people willing to run communications on his behalf. Patricia was awake, efficient, and very calm, the way good attorneys are calm during emergencies, and she said she would file an emergency motion the following morning and that Celia should document everything and stay inside. Lorenzo was there in 18 minutes. He came through the building lobby and up the stairs. She buzzed him in. And when she opened the door, he looked at her face first, a quick full assessment, and then passed her at the apartment, the same cataloging scan he had done the first time he was here. You're all right, he said. I'm furious, she said. But yes, she told him about the unknown caller, about the words your recent associations. She watched his face while she told it and watched the camera shutter thing happen. That brief, complete stillness. And then it was gone. He has help, she said. He had help, Lorenzo said. Past tense. How do you know? Because I know who that call came from. His voice was flat and final, in the way it got when a decision had already been made and the only remaining variable was execution. And they won't be calling again. She stood in the middle of her kitchen and looked at him. Rain again outside. Chicago in spring was nothing but rain and wind, and the city behaving like the season was a personal insult. He was dry, somehow. She had no idea how he was always dry. I need you to understand something, she said. He waited. I am grateful. For all of it. The watching the building. Tonight. All of it. She crossed her arms, which she recognized as defensive positioning, and did it anyway because she needed the physical boundary. But I need to know what's happening, not the edited version. I need to know if what you're doing is going to blow back on me, on my job, on the case I'm building with Patricia. He held her gaze. She could feel the calibration happening behind his eyes, the same thing she did with clients when she was deciding how much of a truth was useful and how much was simply heavy. There's nothing I'm doing, he said, that touches you legally. That's not negotiable for me. You're clean. I didn't ask about me. I asked about the case. The case is fine. He said it with certainty, not reassurance. Everything I've done works in the same direction as what Patricia is building, not against it. He's been escalating on paper because he's been escalating in person, and you've been documenting it. That doesn't change. She uncrossed her arms. She was not completely satisfied, and he could see that she wasn't, and he didn't try to paper over it. What I need from you, he said, is to stay with your routine. Don't go anywhere at night alone. If he contacts you, forward it immediately and then call me. You're not going to tell me more than that. No? Because you're protecting me or because you don't trust me. Because there are things you're better off not knowing, he said. Not because I don't trust you. Because knowing creates liability you don't need, and I'm not going to do that to you. She thought about this. There was something she wanted to push back on, and she couldn't locate the right edge of it. The logic was sound in a way that acknowledged the exact nature of her professional vulnerability, which meant he had thought about it carefully, which meant this wasn't dismissal, it was consideration. She found she couldn't argue with consideration, even when it frustrated her. Fine, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he moved to the window, not close to it, just near enough to see the street, and looked down. He's gone, he said. For now. For tonight. He turned back. He looked tired, she realized. Not the exhaustion she wore visibly, the dark circles and the thinness Deb had noted, but something older and more structural, the kind of tired that lived in the set of the jaw and the way a person held their own weight. Are you eating? He said. That's a pivot. You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in 2 weeks. I had a granola bar at 3:30. Something moved across his face that was not the slow light-through-water movement, but something shorter, sharper, almost, though she hesitated to apply the word fond. I'm going to send food tomorrow, he said. Don't argue with me about it. I'm a grown adult who can feed. I know you are. He moved toward the door. I'm sending food. She opened her mouth and closed it. Thank you, she said, instead of arguing. For tonight. He nodded, hand on the door, and then he stopped and stood there for a moment, not turning, just standing, and she had the sense of something working through him that hadn't resolved yet. Celia, he said, still not turning. Yes, this is what I do doesn't usually. A pause. She had never heard him stumble before, not once in all the conversations they had had, and the stumble was more arresting than anything polished could have been. There are rules, he said, about proximity, in my world, about who you get close to and why. I followed those rules for a long time. She waited. I want you to know, he said, that I know what I'm doing by being here. It's not careless. It's the opposite of careless. He turned then, finally, and looked at her, and whatever was in his face in that moment was the most undefended thing she had seen from him yet. I want you to know that. She stood in her kitchen and looked at him, and the refrigerator hummed, and the rain hit the window, and somewhere below on Dearborn a car passed and was gone. I know, she said. He left. She stood there for a while after. Then she went to the window he had looked out of and looked down at the empty street, wet and orange under the lights, and she pressed her forehead against the cold glass and stayed like that for a full minute, breathing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Travis. I'll wait as long as it takes. She read it. She documented it. She sent it to Patricia Soul. Then she sent one more message to Lorenzo. He texted. His response came in 4 seconds. I saw it. She stared at the response. I saw it, which meant he was still there, or someone who reported to him was still there, watching the building, watching her window, watching the street below, watching Travis's communications, apparently. She was inside a layer of surveillance she hadn't consented to and couldn't fully see, and was not certain how she felt about it. She thought about consent and safety, and the way those two things were not always aligned in a life that had already been taken from her once, slowly, by a man who had used her own kindness as a mechanism of control. She put the phone down. She went to bed. At 2:17 a.m., she woke to a sound in the hallway that turned out to be a neighbor's door, and not what she feared, but in the 90 seconds between hearing and understanding, she lay completely still with her heart making its architectural demands and her hands flat on the mattress, and she thought, this cannot go on. Something had to break. She didn't know yet that the breaking was already in motion, that Travis had spent the last 3 days talking to an attorney of his own, a man who operated in the specific gray zone between legitimate grievance and manufactured crisis, and that this attorney had found, in the tangle of the mutual restraining order application, a procedural thread worth pulling. She didn't know that by the time she arrived at Patricia Soul's office the following Tuesday, the landscape would have shifted in a way that Patricia, for all her skill, had not anticipated. She didn't know that by the end of that week, the one tool Lorenzo DeLuca had spent his entire adult life using would be taken from his hands. She only knew that the hallway was quiet again, and that outside her window the city ran on, indifferent, enormous, and that somewhere in it a man was waiting. The wrong one. And somewhere else, a man who was learning, for the first time, that there were. Patricia Soul's office was on the 14th floor of a building in the West Loop that had good bones and bad elevator music, and on the Tuesday morning, Celia arrived for what she expected to be a routine update on the restraining order timeline. The attorney was standing at her window with her back to the door, and did not turn immediately when Celia came in. That was the first sign. Patricia Soul did not waste motion. In 4 months of working together, Celia had observed a woman who was constitutionally incapable of standing with her back to a room when there was work to be done, which meant the posture at the window was not absent-mindedness, but its opposite, the deliberate physical management of an expression that wasn't ready to be seen yet. Sit down, Patricia said, still not turning. Celia sat. She put her canvas bag on the floor beside the chair and folded her hands on her knees and waited, because she had learned in this office and in many other difficult rooms that the worst thing you could do when something bad was coming was rush it. Patricia turned. She was 51, with silver-streaked hair she kept short, and a face that had processed a great deal of other people's worst days without going brittle from it. She sat down across from Celia and set a document on the desk between them, and did not push it forward yet. Travis's attorney filed a motion yesterday afternoon, she said. I received it at 4:50, which was deliberately timed, I think, to limit my response window before close of business. Celia looked at the document. What kind of motion? Cross-application. He's claiming that the escalation of contact over the last 3 weeks constitutes a pattern of coordinated harassment, not from Travis toward you, but from a third party acting on your behalf toward Travis. Patricia's voice was even and precise and completely controlled. He's named Lorenzo DeLuca specifically. He's alleging that DeLuca has used agents to surveil, intimidate, and make threatening contact with Travis at your direction, and he is requesting that the court issue a mutual emergency restraining order, one that would prohibit both Travis and DeLuca from coming within 500 feet of Travis, separately and together. The room was very quiet. Celia heard the air conditioning. She heard a phone ring twice in an outer office and stop. She heard her own breathing, which was slower than it should have been, the body's strange talent for going calm at exactly the moments when calm felt impossible. He can't... She stopped. That's not... I didn't direct anything. I never asked Lorenzo to. I know that. Patricia's voice was careful. Or I believe it. What matters is what can be demonstrated, and what Travis's attorney is alleging is detailed enough to suggest he has documentation. Photographs? Phone records, possibly. Witness statements from at least 2 individuals who claim to have been approached by men they identify as working for DeLuca. She paused. The approach in question was described as coercive. Celia pressed her fingertips against the edge of the desk, one at a time, methodical, keeping herself inside her own skin. The private conversation, she said. Lorenzo told me he had a private conversation with Travis 3 weeks ago. That would be the first incident documented in the filing. There were others? Patricia looked at her with the expression of a woman who is trying to balance professional accuracy against something that looked like personal compassion. 3 documented incidents, 2 involving men who identified themselves as representatives of DeLuca Holdings, 1 involving what the filing describes as a direct physical confrontation, though the details are characteristically vague on Travis's side. Celia sat back in her chair. She looked at the ceiling, the acoustic tiles, the fluorescent rectangle above the desk. She thought about, I'll handle it, and past tense, and there are things you're better off not knowing. She thought about how carefully each of those phrases had been constructed to keep her exactly far enough from the truth that she couldn't be held accountable for it, and she understood, with a clarity that arrived all at once like cold water, that she had allowed herself to be managed the way she had spent her career teaching other people they were being managed. What happens now, she said. Her voice was flat. She was grateful for the flatness. The judge will review the emergency motion. Given the specificity of the allegations, I think there's a reasonable chance it gets granted on a preliminary basis pending a full hearing. Patricia leaned forward slightly. Celia, if that order is granted, Lorenzo DeLuca cannot come near you, legally. A mutual restraining order of this kind would prohibit contact between them, and proximity to you makes contact with Travis geometrically likely. The order would functionally isolate you from DeLuca's protection. The words sat on the desk between them like something physical. Travis planned this, Celia said. Travis's attorney planned this, Patricia said. Yes. He provoked Lorenzo into acting. He pushed and kept pushing until Lorenzo responded in ways that could be documented, and then he built a legal case out of Lorenzo's responses. That's my read, Patricia said. Yes. Celia looked at the document. She thought about the unknown caller. Mr. DeLuca is not a man you should be accepting favors from. Not a warning, a recording, or the predicate to one. How long do we have before the judge rules? 48 hours, possibly less. She picked up her canvas bag. She stood up. I need to make a call, she said. Celia! Patricia's voice stopped her at the door. Whatever you're going to say to him, be careful about what you say on the phone. If they have his communications under any kind of surveillance, and I think they might... I know, Celia said. I know. She walked to the elevator and pressed the button and stood there while the light descended from 22, and she stared at the closed doors and felt something she recognized from the worst periods of her adolescence. The specific sensation of a floor dropping away beneath her, of having built something carefully and having it disassemble in a direction she couldn't reverse. The elevator opened. She got in. She waited until the doors closed, and then she called him. He answered on the first ring. "I know," he said. "Don't." Her voice came out harder than she intended, and she didn't soften it. "Don't tell me you already know. Tell me why you didn't tell me when you were doing it." A silence. "Come to me," he said. "Not on the phone. Lorenzo. Please." The word was not a word she had heard from him before. Not once. The slight change in weight it carried told her everything about how rarely he used it. "Fine," she said. "Send me an address." The address was not his penthouse. It was a building in the near north side, an unremarkable 6-story structure that had a lobby staffed by a man who clearly knew who she was before she gave her name, which under different circumstances might have unnerved her, but which currently ranked about 14th on her list of things to be unsettled by. She was taken to a 4th-floor office. Not lavish, functional, the kind of room where actual work happened rather than the performance of work. And Lorenzo was there, standing, not sitting, which meant he had been moving before she arrived. He looked at her face when she came in. She let him look. "Sit down," he said. "I'll stand." He nodded, once. He didn't push it. "Tell me everything you did," she said. "All of it. Not what you thought I needed to know. Everything." He told her. He was precise and complete, and left nothing useful out, which she suspected cost him something, and she did not thank him for it because gratitude was not what she felt. The private conversation with Travis 3 weeks ago, 2 of his men present, Travis's arm physically restrained, a clear articulation of consequences. A second approach after the unknown caller incident, more direct. A third, last week, after Travis appeared outside her building, involving a man Travis had hired to relay messages. That man had been located, interviewed in terms that did not involve politeness, and had declined future employment. When he finished, the room was quiet. "You used coercion," she said. "Yes. On a man who was already building a legal case against you." "I didn't know he was building a legal case. I knew he was a threat to you. And it didn't occur to you that everything you did would be documented." A muscle moved in his jaw. "I underestimated his attorney. You underestimated him." She turned away from him, toward the window, the near north side below. Traffic. Ordinary Tuesday motion. The world continuing at its normal pace while the structure she had been living inside collapsed with architectural precision. "You're a man who plans everything," she said, "who told me to my face that he knows exactly where the lines are, and you walked straight across every one of them. To protect you." "Don't." She turned back. "Don't make that the reason. The reason doesn't change the result. The result is that in 48 hours, a judge is going to grant an emergency order that legally separates me from the only protection that's been working, and Travis is going to have exactly what he's been trying to get for 7 months. Me. Alone. Without recourse." Her voice didn't break. She was furious at herself for how close it came. "You handed him that?" Lorenzo stood very still. She had seen him process difficult information before, and he always went still. But this was different. This was the stillness of a man absorbing something he couldn't deflect or reframe, a direct hit, and watching him receive it was both satisfying and terrible in a way she didn't have language for. "I know," he said. "That's not enough." "I know that too." She turned back to the window. She pressed one hand flat against the glass, cold against her palm. Below, a delivery truck was double parked and a taxi was trying to get around it and someone was honking. Normal, stupid, relentless normalcy. "The hearing," she said. "Is there anything Patricia can do?" "My attorneys are already in contact with hers. Without my knowledge. As of 20 minutes ago, yes." She took a slow breath. "You need to understand something," she said. "I have spent 4 months building a clean legal case. Clean, documented, every text, every call, every incident logged with timestamps and professional witnesses. I have done everything right. I have been—" Her voice tightened. She pushed through it. "I have been so careful. Because I know what happens when you're not careful. I know what it looks like to a judge when a case has edges. I know what Travis's attorney is going to do with those edges." She turned. "You gave him the edges." Lorenzo looked at her. In his face was something she had never seen there before. Not guilt exactly, because guilt had a soft, collapsing quality, and this was the opposite of soft. It was harder than guilt, more precise. The expression of a man who had made a calculation, stood behind it fully, and was now standing behind the consequences of it with the same unbroken posture. It was accountability without self-pity, and it was, she thought, the most honest thing she had ever seen on a human face, and she was furious at herself for noticing. "The hearing," he said. "My attorney thinks there's an argument. The documented history of Travis's escalation predates any action I took. Patricia's record is clean. The timeline works in your favor. And if the judge grants it anyway?" He was quiet for a beat that felt like a held breath. "Then I stay away," he said, "legally, and I find other ways." "Other ways," she repeated, "like the ways you used before." "No." The word was immediate and absolute. "Not those ways, cleaner." She studied him. She thought about trust and what it meant to extend it to a person whose world ran on different rules than yours, whose protection came with a cost she hadn't been invoiced for yet. She thought about the 47 messages and Mrs. Okafor in Pilsen, and the teenager in Uptown who was missing school and the 3 siblings who needed to go back before the judge. And she thought about the fact that she was standing in an office on the near North Side having a conversation that her professional self should have refused to have 3 months ago. "I need to go back to work," she said. "Celia, I have a home visit at 2 and a case review at 4, and I am not going to let this—" She stopped. "I am not going to let any of this make me worse at my job. That's all I have left that's completely mine." He moved then, not toward her, sideways to the desk, where he picked up a phone and said something brief she didn't catch. Then he turned back. "Marcus will drive you." "I can take a cab." "Marcus will drive you," he said again, with the particular quiet authority that she had learned was not stubbornness but certainty, and she was too tired to fight it and too honest to pretend the offer wasn't practical. She picked up her canvas bag. At the door she stopped. "One question," she said. "Yes. If the order gets granted, if it goes the way Travis wants it to go." She didn't turn around. "What happens to you?" The pause was long enough that she nearly filled it herself. "Nothing," he said. "I can manage the legal exposure. My organization doesn't collapse because I can't—" He stopped. Something in his voice had shifted register slightly, gone somewhere less managed. "What happens to me is not your concern." "I'm making it my concern." Silence. "Lorenzo." She turned finally. "What happens to you?" He looked at her from across the room, and she thought that if she lived to be 100, she would remember the precise quality of his face in that moment, the gray eyes and the old scar, and the weather-worn architecture of a man who had spent his entire adult life making sure nothing and no one could be used against him, who had broken his own most fundamental rule for reasons he had called the opposite of careless, and who was now standing in the wreckage of that decision with his hands open. "I'll be fine," he said. She believed him and didn't believe him simultaneously, and she didn't have the bandwidth to hold both of those things and also get to her 2 o'clock home visit, so she nodded and walked out and got into the car Marcus brought around and watched the near North Side go past through tinted glass, while her hands rested in her lap and her mind went to work on the problem the way it always did, methodically, from the edges inward, cataloging what was lost and what remained and what could yet be salvaged. The judge granted the emergency order at 6:47 the following evening. Patricia called her while she was eating dinner, she couldn't taste at her kitchen table, surrounded by case files, and delivered the news in the level, unsparing tone of a professional who respected her enough not to soften it. Mutual emergency restraining order. 500 feet. Pending full hearing in 14 days. Lorenzo was legally removed from her radius before the call ended. She sat at the kitchen table after she put the phone down, and she didn't move for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. The case files sat around her in their organized stacks, patient and indifferent. Outside, the city made its noise. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. New, not the same one as before. 3 words. "I told you, Travis." She forwarded it to Patricia. She documented the time. She looked at the empty chair across the table where no one was sitting. She thought about 14 days, about what Travis knew and what he could do in 14 days now that the arithmetic had shifted. About the building she lived in, third floor, good locks, bad heating, a landlord who treated urgency as a character flaw. She thought about the teenager in Uptown who was missing school again, and the way she always told that teenager, "You cannot control what other people do. You can only control what you do next." She stood up. She went to her bedroom. She opened the closet and pulled down a bag from the top shelf. Go bag, packed 6 months ago, a habit learned from the years before she trusted locks. And she set it on the bed and looked at it. Then she picked up her phone and called Deb. Deb answered on the second ring in the particular alert way of someone who had been half expecting a call they hoped wouldn't come. "Tell me," Deb said. Celia told her. "All of it this time. No editing. The full picture, Lorenzo and Travis, and the legal architecture that had just been used to dismantle the only effective protection she had." She told it flat and complete, and when she was done, there was a silence on Deb's end that had the quality of someone recalculating. "You can stay with me," Deb said. "Tonight, however long." "He knows your name," Celia said. "He knows where I work. He'd find me there within 2 days. Then we get you somewhere he doesn't know." "There isn't—" She stopped, looked at the go bag. There might be somewhere. She was thinking about a name Lorenzo had mentioned once in passing in the near North Side office. Someone he described as someone outside his world who owed him nothing and therefore could offer something clean. She had not asked for details at the time because she had not thought she would need them. She thought about whether she could ask for them now, given the terms of the order, given the 500 feet, given the way the law had been turned into a weapon and pointed at exactly the wrong person. She thought about what came next if she stayed. She thought about the message on the mirror that the outline had described. "You belong to me." And how she had read that in the documentation she and Patricia had assembled and had noted it clinically, professionally, as evidence of escalating ideation. She was no longer reading it clinically. She picked up the go bag. She put 3 things in her coat pocket. Her phone, Patricia Soul's card, and the business card with the number she was now legally complicated by calling. She looked at the business card for a moment. Lorenzo DeLuca, clean type, white card. Just the name and the number. She put it back in her pocket. She walked to her front door. She put her hand on the lock. And that was the moment her phone lit up with a notification from the building's front door camera, an app she had installed 3 months ago that she checked compulsively, that had given her 43 false alarms and 6 real ones, and which was giving her one now. She looked at the screen. Travis Hale was standing in her building lobby. Not outside it, inside it, which meant someone had let him in, or he had followed someone in, or he had found a way she hadn't accounted for despite accounting for every way she could imagine. And he was standing in the lobby of her building looking directly at the camera with the particular expression she now knew was not anger and not grief, but something that had burned through both of those. She had 4 seconds to make a decision. The camera feed showed Travis in the lobby, standing still, looking up at the lens with the flat, purposeful expression of a man who had stopped pretending. 4 seconds before he moved toward the elevator or the stairs, and the geometry of the building collapsed into something she couldn't manage from behind a locked door on the 3rd floor. She didn't think. She moved, go bag over one shoulder, keys in her left hand, phone in her right, already dialing Patricia's emergency line as she went out her front door into the hallway, pulling it shut behind her with the quiet, deliberate click of someone who understood that sound traveled in old buildings and that she needed every second the silence could buy her. The hallway was empty, fluorescent overhead, the smell of someone's dinner, garlic and oil coming from the apartment at the end. Ordinary. Indifferent. She went for the stairwell at the far end, away from the elevator, away from the front lobby, and pushed through the fire door and took the stairs down 2 at a time, hand on the rail, not running, controlled fast, the kind of movement that doesn't make noise if you're careful about where the weight lands. Patricia's line rang 3 times and went to voicemail. She left 8 words. "Travis is in my building. I'm leaving now." Then she hung up and called Lorenzo. She called Lorenzo because he was the person whose phone he answered in under 2 rings, and because the restraining order applied to him and Travis, not to her, and because she was done being careful about edges when Travis Hale was in her lobby. He answered before the first ring finished. "He's inside my building," she said. already at the first floor landing, pushing through the door into the narrow service corridor that led to the rear exit, which she had located 3 months ago and never been more grateful for. "I'm out the back. I know. Keep moving. What direction are you heading?" "East, back alley behind the building." "Stay on the line." His voice was completely level, which should have been infuriating and was instead the most stabilizing thing she had heard all evening. She could hear movement on his end, low voices, the specific quality of a room that had just received information and was reorganizing around it. She hit the rear exit, and the cold hit her. Real cold, not the artificial cold of the building, April night cold with wind off the lake. And she was in the alley behind Dearborn, wet pavement under her feet, dumpsters on her left, a chain-link fence at the far end, with a gap she had also noted 3 months ago, because she was the kind of person who noted things. "I'm in the alley," she said. "There's a car at the end of the block. Black sedan. Driver's name is Marcus. You know him." The order, "Marcus isn't me." His voice had an edge to it that wasn't anger at her, she understood, but at the situation, at the 14 days that had become this. "Get to Marcus." She moved down the alley. Her breath was coming out in visible puffs, white in the cold, and her heart was doing the architectural thing again, but she wasn't letting it run the show. She had the go bag, she had both cards, she had her phone. She was okay. She was moving, behind her and above her, from the direction of her building. She heard a door. She didn't look back. She moved faster. The gap in the chain-link fence was exactly where she remembered it. She went through sideways, bag scraping the edge, the fence rattling with a sound that seemed enormous in the alley quiet. And she was on the parallel street, and the black sedan was there, 30 feet away, engine running, Marcus in the driver's seat already looking at her in the rear view. She got in. "Go," she said. Marcus went. She looked through the rear window as the car pulled away. The mouth of the alley, empty. Or not empty, she thought, but whatever was there was behind the fence, and the fence was behind her, and the car was moving, and she was inside it. "I have her," Marcus said, not to her. Into a phone clipped to the dash. Lorenzo's voice came through the car speaker. "Celia, I'm here." Her hands were shaking now, which she allowed because she was in the car and she could afford it. She pressed them flat on her knees, felt the trembling move from her hands into the pressure against her legs, contained it there. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere he doesn't know. 20 minutes. "The order?" "You'll be somewhere safe. I won't be there." The pause that followed was brief and had something in it she didn't have bandwidth to name. "You'll be safe." She pressed her forehead back against the cold window the way she had done at her apartment, glass against skin, the shock of the temperature grounding her in her own body. Outside, Chicago moved past. The ordinary, unremarkable movement of a city at 9:30 on a Tuesday. People in restaurants, people walking dogs, a group of students at a crosswalk, a whole world that was not her problem. "He looked at the camera," she said, "in the lobby. He stood there and looked directly at it." "I know. That wasn't someone who panicked and did something reckless. That was planned." "Yes. He wanted me to see him. He wanted me to run. A beat." "Or he wanted to see what you'd run toward," Lorenzo said, and the implication of it landed with a weight she felt physically. She sat with it. Travis, patient. Travis, attorney Travis. Documented evidence Travis. Standing in her lobby and looking at the camera and doing the calculation. Not, "I'll catch her here, but I'll see where she goes and who comes for her." "He's trying to document me calling you," she said. "Tonight, this." "Yes." Lorenzo's voice was careful. "Which is why Marcus drove and not me, and why where you're going has no connection to my name. Patricia will be there within the hour. Whatever is documented tonight, you fled a dangerous situation. That's all." She looked at her phone, at the call she had made to him, the record of it, 12 seconds after discovering Travis in her lobby. "I called you first," she said. "You called me while you were moving. Patricia's voicemail is documented before my call." She thought about this. She thought about the order of the calls, the timestamps, the story the records would tell. She thought about whether he had anticipated this, had known she would call him first, had known it would look a certain way, had constructed the Marcus not me architecture specifically to account for it. She thought about whether it was terrifying or reassuring that he thought 7 moves ahead, and she thought it was probably both. And the difference between terrifying and reassuring was mostly a matter of which side of the board you were on. "Okay," she said. Marcus pulled into a parking structure in Streeterville she didn't recognize and took them up to the third level and into a space beside an elevator that opened directly into the residential floors of an adjacent building. She understood, without being told, that this was not a public access point. "Second floor, Unit 204, Marcus said. "Key code is 7731. Ms. Soul has the same code." She got out of the car. She looked at Marcus, who was 60 or so, gray-haired, with the unhurried competence of a man who had done difficult things for a long time and had decided that difficulty was simply the nature of some work. "Thank you," she said. "Yes, ma'am," he said, which was neither warm nor cold, just a fact. She took the elevator. Unit 204 was clean and spare and had clearly not been recently inhabited. The refrigerator held bottled water and nothing else. The closet had extra blankets on the shelf. The furniture was the furniture of a place that served a function rather than a life. It was a safe house, or close enough to one that the distinction didn't matter. She stood in the center of it and looked around and thought, this is what it's come to. Then she thought, this is not the worst thing. Then she thought about the look on Travis's face in the camera feed and stopped thinking about worse things. Patricia arrived 40 minutes later, in a charcoal coat with her briefcase and the expression of a woman who had been through difficult Tuesday evenings before and had decided long ago that they were still Tuesday evenings. She sat across from Celia at the small table near the window and opened her briefcase and began. "I need everything," she said. "Timeline from the moment you saw the camera feed." Celia gave it to her. Everything, in order, exact timestamps. The call to Patricia's emergency line. The call to Lorenzo. The exit through the service corridor. Marcus. The parking structure. She laid it out with the clinical precision she used in case reports, and Patricia took notes without interrupting. When she finished, Patricia looked at her notes. "The call to DeLuca," she said. 12 seconds after your call to my line." "I know." A judge could interpret that as, "I know what a judge could interpret." She kept her voice even. "I was in my building with a man I have documented evidence of fearing for my physical safety. I called the first number I could reach, which happened to be the number of a man currently under restraining order provisions that prohibit contact with your stalker, which happened to be the number of the person who has answered every time I called." She looked at Patricia directly. "You went to voicemail." Patricia was quiet for a moment, then she set her pen down. "That's not a criticism," she said. "It's a vulnerability in the record I need to account for." She picked the pen back up. "Did Lorenzo DeLuca have contact with Travis Hale tonight?" "Not as far as I know." "Did Marcus have contact with Travis Hale tonight?" "Not as far as I know." "Good." She made a note. "Celia, the emergency order was 2 days old. Travis was in your building within 48 hours of getting what he wanted legally. I'm going to use tonight to apply for an emergency violation hearing. His presence in your building is a violation of the original temporary restraining order provisions that predate the mutual order. That's still active. He had no legal right to enter your building. Can you move on it tonight? I have a judge's emergency line and a very organized file." Patricia allowed herself something that was nearly a smile. "I can move on it tonight." Celia nodded. She looked at the window. The city, through the glass, doing its relentless thing. And the full hearing, 14 days. 13 now. I'm going to be filing significantly more material than I had planned for it. Patricia stood, closed her briefcase, looked at Celia with the expression she had shown once or twice before, not professional distance, but actual human recognition of what it costs to sit across a table like this and keep your voice steady. "You did the right things tonight, sequentially." "I know," Celia said. "I'm still furious." "Good," Patricia said, and the word was so close to something Lorenzo had said months ago that Celia almost smiled. "Stay that way." After Patricia left, Celia sat alone in the spare room and tried to eat something, crackers from the go bag, and checked her phone and found 3 texts from Travis sent to her number in the 90 minutes since she'd left her building. The first said, "I just want to talk to you. That's all I've ever wanted." The second said, "I know you're with him. I know where you went." The third said nothing. It was a photograph. Her building, her window, lit from inside. The light she had left on in her kitchen, taken from the street below. Time stamped 11 minutes ago. He was outside her building. She wasn't there, and he was still outside it, photographing the light she'd left on, waiting for her to come back. She forwarded all three to Patricia with timestamps. She put the phone face down on the table. She pressed her palms flat on the surface and breathed. In through the nose, 4 counts, out through the mouth, 4 counts, the way she had taught a 16-year-old in Uptown to do it when the walls came in. Then she picked the phone back up and called Lorenzo. He answered in one ring, as always. "The texts," she said. "You've seen them?" "Yes." "He's at my apartment. He thinks I'm there." "I know." "Lorenzo." She stood up. She couldn't be still. She moved to the window, then away from it, then back. "The 14 days, the hearing. He's not going to wait 14 days, you know that." "Yes. So what are we doing?" It came out harder than she intended, and she didn't take it back. "I'm in a safe house with crackers and bottled water and no clothes, and Patricia is filing an emergency motion at midnight, and Travis is outside my apartment taking photographs. What are we actually doing?" The silence on his end had a different quality than his usual silences. Fuller, like a room before weather moves in. "I need to tell you something," he said. She waited. "The full hearing in 13 days. Travis's attorney is planning to introduce evidence that my organization has used this situation, your situation, to move against a competitor operating in Travis's building's district, making it look like Travis was a means to an end." The crackers she'd managed to eat turned over in her stomach. "Is it true?" "No." "Immediate." "Absolute." "But they have a document they're going to present as proof. It's constructed, fabricated, but it's good work, and it will require time to disprove. More time than 13 days. She stood very still. "So the hearing gets complicated. My legal team is working on the document, but there's a window between now and the hearing where everything is unstable, where he knows it's unstable. And he's going to use it." "He's going to escalate," Lorenzo said. "Yes. He's been patient because he was building the legal case. The legal case is built. He doesn't need patience anymore." She looked at the window, the dark glass, her own reflection faint in it, a woman in a coat in a borrowed room, go bag at her feet, crackers on the table. "So the next 13 days, she said. "Are going to be the hardest part," Lorenzo said. "Yes." She absorbed this. She turned it over. She thought about Travis's face in the lobby camera. She thought about, "I know where you went," and the photograph of her lit window. She thought about a fabricated document and a hearing 13 days away, and a man who had spent months constructing exactly this moment, this window of instability, with the patience of someone who had decided that his entire life's purpose was the ownership of one person. "I need you to tell me something honestly," she said. "Yes." "If I were not in the picture, if this were purely about the legal threat, the document, your organization, could you handle it?" A pause. "Yes." "Then the only reason this is as dangerous as it is," she said slowly, "is me. I am the pressure point he's using. As long as he can threaten me, he has leverage over you, and as long as he has leverage over you, the document is a weapon." "Celia, am I wrong?" The pause was longer this time. "No," he said, "you're not wrong. So I need to stop being a pressure point." She said it with the flat certainty of someone arriving at the conclusion of a logical sequence they had been working through without knowing it. "I need to stop being something he can use against you. That means I can't keep being—" She stopped. She put her hand against the wall. The plaster was cold. "I can't keep needing you to protect me, Lorenzo. Every time you do, it costs you something. Every time it costs you something, he documents it. Every time he documents it, the case gets worse. You're not a liability. I am mathematically a liability, and you know it." Her voice was steady. She was furious and clear-headed, and both of those things at once. "Which means I have to become something else." "What does that mean?" She looked at her reflection in the dark window. The coat, the go-bag. The woman who had left her apartment with 3 things in her pocket and no plan except move. "It means," she said, "that I stop waiting for the legal process and the safe houses and the careful documentation to be enough. It means I walk into that courtroom in 13 days and I make the case myself." She pressed her hand harder against the wall. Not Patricia's case, not your attorney's case, mine, my testimony, my words, in open court, where he cannot document it, cannot construct a counter-narrative, cannot use a lawyer to reframe it. Just me and what I know and what I've lived. The silence on Lorenzo's end stretched long. You'd be exposed, he said finally. In open court, Travis's attorney would cross-examine you. Everything. Your history with me, the calls, tonight. I know. It gives them a platform. It gives me one too. She dropped her hand from the wall. And I'm a better witness than Travis is. I'm a social worker who has spent 4 years testifying in cases and documenting facts, and I know exactly how to be believed in a courtroom. He knows how to perform victimhood. I know how to tell the truth. She paused. And his attorney doesn't know what I know about Travis. The things I never put in the file because I was trying to protect him, stupidly, even after everything. Things that changed the picture completely. What things? Things I'll tell the court, she said, in 13 days. Another long silence. She heard him breathe. Just once, slow and controlled. You don't have to do it this way, he said. Your attorneys are defending your organization. Patricia is defending me from Travis. Nobody is doing what needs to be done, which is destroying his credibility completely and permanently in a room full of people who have the power to end this. She looked at her reflection. I can do that. I am the only one who can do that, because I was there. The city hummed beyond the window. Somewhere below, a siren started and faded. Chicago, doing what it always did. Celia. His voice, when he spoke again, had the quality she had cataloged as the slowest and most undefended, light through water. If it goes wrong in that courtroom, I know. If his attorney finds a thread and pulls it, I know, Lorenzo. She picked up the go bag from the floor and set it on the table. I've been managing risk assessments for 4 years. I know what the exposure looks like. I'm making the choice anyway. A beat. Okay, he said. Okay, she said. She sat down in the chair at the small table with the go bag in front of her and the crackers she hadn't finished and the bottled water. And she thought about 13 days, about the fabricated document and Travis's attorney and an open courtroom and the things she had never put in the file because she had been protecting a man who spent every subsequent month using that protection to dismantle her life piece by. She spent the next 13 days becoming a weapon. Not the kind with edges you could see. The kind that looks like a woman sitting quietly at a table with a yellow legal pad and a pen, writing things down in the careful, chronological order of someone who has decided that precision is the only form of power left to her. She wrote every incident, every date, every word she remembered verbatim, and she remembered more than Travis would expect, because she had spent 4 years training her memory to retain exactly the kind of detail that courts required, and she had been retaining detail about Travis Hale since long before she understood why. She wrote the things she had never put in the file. The night 14 months ago, before the breakup, when he had taken her phone and read every message and then sat across from her at her own kitchen table and described with complete calm what he would do if he found anything he didn't like. She had told herself it wasn't a threat. She had been wrong. She wrote it down now, date, time, his exact words, the particular flat quality of his voice when he said them. The conversation 6 months before that, when he had told her, gently, reasonably, that her friendship with a male colleague was a form of disrespect, and she had apologized. She had apologized. She wrote that down too, because the apology was evidence of the dynamic in a way that his behavior alone wasn't, and she understood the mechanics of abuse documentation well enough to know that her own responses were part of the record. She wrote 12 pages in the first 3 days. Patricia came to the Streeterville apartment every evening. She read everything Celia wrote with the focused attention of a surgeon reading a scan, and after the 3rd evening, she put the legal pad down and looked at Celia across the table and said, "This changes the case." "I know," Celia said. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" Celia looked at the legal pad, at her own handwriting, small and precise, filling the lines. "Because I was still protecting him," she said, "out of habit. The way you protect someone you've loved, even after love has nothing to do with it anymore." She picked up the pen. "I'm done with that." Patricia looked at her for a moment longer than was strictly professional. "The fabricated document," she said. My counterpart got an independent analyst on it 4 days ago. There are metadata inconsistencies. It won't hold. How sure? 85% sure it gets thrown out before the hearing ends. She paused. Which means Travis's entire strategy rests on the courtroom, on his performance and his attorney's cross-examination. Then we take the courtroom, Celia said. Patricia nodded. She picked up the legal pad again. Keep writing, she said. Travis violated the temporary restraining order twice more in the 13 days. The first time was a drive-by. His car, her street, 3 in the morning, caught by a traffic camera and documented by a police report filed at 6 a.m. when Celia received the notification from her building's external camera system. She was not in the building. She watched the footage from the Streeterville apartment in the dark on her phone and felt something she could not call fear exactly, because fear had a quality of uncertainty, and what she felt watching Travis's car move slowly past her lit window was the opposite of uncertain. It was the feeling of confirmation, of a pattern completing itself, of a man who could not stop even when stopping was his only surviving strategy. The second violation was the text he sent at 11:40 on the 9th day. 2 words. Almost time. She forwarded it to Patricia at 11:41. Patricia filed the violation report at 7 a.m. By 9, the judge who would be presiding over the full hearing had the report in hand, which meant he had the full documentation of Travis's behavior during the period of the order before the hearing even opened, which meant Travis had walked into the courtroom already carrying a weight his attorney would have to explain. Celia understood when she understood this that Travis had made a fundamental error. He had confused patience with discipline. He could wait. She knew that, had experienced the particular horror of being waited for, but he could not be still. When the pressure reached a certain point, he always moved, always produced evidence of himself, always needed to announce his presence in a way that made him feel powerful and made the record against him worse. His attorney was good, but no attorney was good enough to manage a client who kept handing the opposition ammunition during the 10 days before trial. She slept in the 13 days better than she had in 8 months. She was not sure what to make of that. The hearing was on a Thursday. She wore the charcoal wool coat, not the one 2 sizes too large. She had gone back to her apartment for clothes on day 5 when Patricia confirmed the building was clear, but a different charcoal coat fitted, the one she wore when she testified in family court, because it communicated exactly the right combination of professional authority and human accessibility. She wore her hair back. She carried the canvas bag with the legal pad and the documentation and nothing else. Patricia met her in the courthouse lobby at 8:15. They walked to the courtroom together without speaking, which was not tension, but the particular focused silence of 2 people who had prepared everything that could be prepared and now simply had to execute. Lorenzo's attorney, a tall woman named Judith Chen, who Celia had met once in Patricia's office and had immediately respected with the instinctive respect one extends to people who are visibly excellent at difficult things, was already in the corridor outside the courtroom when they arrived. She acknowledged Celia with a brief nod that contained, Celia thought, something like approval. Travis was already inside. She could see him through the small window in the courtroom door, seated beside his attorney, in a blue suit, his back to the door. He was holding a coffee cup in both hands the way he had been holding the cold paper cup on the night of the intersection, and something about the identical gesture made her chest tighten with a recognition that was not sympathy and was not fear, and was not grief exactly, but contained the ghost of all 3. She pushed through the door. He turned when she entered. She had expected that he would. He always turned when she entered rooms, some animal radar that had once felt like attentiveness and now felt like what it actually was. He looked at her face, and whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression, a small recalibration, a man who had prepared for a version of her that was no longer present. She sat down at the table beside Patricia and placed the canvas bag on the floor and folded her hands on the table and looked at the front of the courtroom and waited. Travis testified first. His attorney had built him well. He was measured, articulate, appropriately regretful about certain behaviors which he framed as the desperate actions of a man who loved too much, rather than a man who understood too little about what love required. He described the restraining order process as a legal apparatus weaponized against him by a woman under the influence of a dangerous man. He described Lorenzo De Luca with the careful language of someone who had been coached to stop short of defamation while still drawing the clearest possible picture of menace and manipulation. He described Celia as someone he feared for, not someone he feared. He was good at it. She had known he would be. When his attorney sat down, the fabricated document was entered into evidence. Judith Chen stood up immediately and requested a voir dire on the document's authenticity, and the next 40 minutes were technical and procedural and the kind of thing that looked boring from the outside but functioned, Celia knew, as the quiet demolition of Travis's evidentiary foundation. When the judge, a man in his early 60s named Harmon, who had the face of someone who had heard many versions of many stories and had developed a very accurate internal instrument for distinguishing between them, sustained Judith Chen's objection to the document's admissibility, Travis's attorney went briefly, invisibly. Still in the way that attorneys go still when something they were counting on has just been removed from the structure. Travis, from across the room, looked at Celia. She looked back. She did not look away first. Then it was her turn. She took the stand with the physical composure of someone who had been on witness stands before. Straight spine, hands in her lap, voice calibrated to carry without effort, in a courtroom's particular acoustic. The judge asked preliminary questions, and she answered them with the clean precision of someone who understood that every word on a stand was on record and that the record was the thing. Patricia walked her through the documentation first. The texts, the calls, the incidents, the dates. Celia gave each one with the same quality she brought to case reports, factual, specific, without embellishment, because embellishment was what courts looked for when they were deciding whether to believe someone, and she had no need for it. The facts were sufficient. The facts had always been sufficient. The problem had never been the facts. The problem had been her own reluctance to use them fully. Then Patricia said, "Ms. Vaughn, you mentioned there are incidents that were not included in your original documentation. Can you tell the court why?" Celia looked at the judge. "Because I was protecting him," she said, "out of what I can only describe as habit. I had spent 18 months learning to manage his responses by minimizing information that might upset him, and I carried that pattern into the documentation process without recognizing it." She paused. "I recognize it now." "And the incidents themselves," she told them. All 12 pages of the legal pad, distilled into testimony that was precise and chronological, and delivered in the even, unsparing voice of a woman who had stopped filtering. She told the courtroom about the phone and the kitchen table and the quiet description of consequences. She told them about the apology she had given for a friendship. She told them about the night she had changed her route home for the 3rd time and found him at the grocery store anyway, and the specific language he had used. "I miss you so much, it's making me sick." And how she had recognized in that moment that his need had nothing to do with her and everything to do with his own requirement for a particular shape of control. The courtroom was very quiet. Travis's attorney cross-examined her for 40 minutes. He was skilled and he was trying, and there were moments where she felt the question designed to destabilize her, to introduce the suggestion of unreliability, to make the jury of the judge's perception wonder whether the woman on the stand was a victim or a participant. She answered each question with the same quality of attention. She did not get angry on the stand. She had decided, before she got on it, that anger was private and testimony was public, and the two required different disciplines. He asked about Lorenzo De Luca, specifically, at length. The calls, the meetings, the safe house, the night Marcus drove her away from a building where Travis's attorney was careful here, where Travis had been present without clear evidence of threatening intent. "Isn't it possible," Travis's attorney said, "that Mr. De Luca's involvement in this situation escalated tensions that might otherwise have resolved naturally?" She looked at him. "No," she said. "Can you elaborate?" "The tensions didn't escalate because Lorenzo De Luca became involved. Lorenzo De Luca became involved because the tensions had already escalated beyond what legal process, in the time frame available, could address. The sequence matters." She paused. "I'm a social worker. Sequence is my job." A small sound from somewhere in the courtroom. Not laughter. Something quieter. Recognition, maybe. Travis's attorney tried twice more to establish that her relationship with Lorenzo had compromised her judgment. Both times she answered directly, without deflection, acknowledging what was true. She had called him when she was frightened. He had helped her. She was not ashamed of either of those things. and declining to concede what was not true, which was that any of it constituted manipulation or coercion on his part. When he finally sat down, she was aware that she was tired. Genuinely, physically tired. The kind that comes from sustaining a level of controlled precision for a long period. And she was aware that her hands in her lap were completely still, which surprised her because she had expected them to shake. Judge Harmon ruled the following morning. Patricia called at 8:47 a.m. Celia was at the Streeterville apartment, sitting at the small table with coffee she had actually made this time, because Marcus had brought groceries 3 days ago without being asked, and she answered on the second ring. "He ruled in your favor," Patricia said, and then she said the rest of it. The specific terms, the sentence, the mandatory provisions, and Celia listened to all of it and said very little because she had learned in the 13 days that silence was not emptiness. Travis Hale was sentenced to 14 months in a correctional facility with mandatory counseling and an extended period of supervised probation to follow. The mutual restraining order was vacated. The original order against Travis was reinstated in strengthened form, covering not just Celia but a list of associated persons that included Lorenzo DeLuca by name. The fabricated document was referred to the state bar for investigation of Travis's attorney. When Patricia finished, there was a silence. "Are you all right?" Patricia asked. Celia looked out the window at the Streeterville morning. The lake was visible from this angle, a thin, bright line of it between the buildings. She thought about whether she was all right, with the seriousness the question deserved. "Not yet," she said, "but I think I will be." That, Patricia said, is the most accurate answer I've heard to that question in 20 years of practice. 3 weeks later, she was back in her apartment. Not the same version of it. She had rearranged the furniture, which was something she had read about and then done without overthinking, a physical reorganization that corresponded to a psychological one she was still in the middle of. The table was no longer covered in case files. She had bought cereal. The refrigerator contained actual food, including things she had bought without any particular purpose other than that she had wanted them, which was a liberty so small and so enormous simultaneously that she had stood in the grocery store on the cereal aisle and felt something move through her that she hadn't been able to name in the moment. She named it now, freedom. The specific, unglamorous grocery store variety. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that just stands in the cereal aisle with no one behind it and chooses what it wants. She was making dinner when her phone rang. Lorenzo. She answered. "The case," she said. "Patricia told me Judith's filing went through." "The Bar Association accepted it," he said. "It'll take time, but yes. Good." She stirred whatever was in the pot, which was something she was making up as she went. "How's your situation?" "Stable." A pause. "Better than stable." She believed him. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what you told me. In the near North Side office. About rules. About who you let close." "Yes. I've been thinking about whether those rules were right or just old." She set the spoon down, turned off the burner, stood in her kitchen in the apartment she had rearranged, and thought about the last 8 months. The rain, the headlights, the business card, the safe house, the courtroom, the cereal. "I'm not saying I've resolved it," she said. "I'm saying I've been thinking about it." "So have I," he said. And a pause with the slow quality of light through water. "And I think," he said, "that the only rules worth keeping are the ones you've actually examined, the ones that survive the examination." She leaned against the counter. "That's not nothing," she said. "No," he said, "it's not." She looked at the rearranged furniture, the cleared table, the cereal on the counter where the case files used to be. She looked at the window that faced the street, and outside the window was a spring evening, real spring this time, the kind that actually meant it, warm and slightly green-smelling the way Chicago got in May when it finally decided to stop arguing with the season. "I'd like to have dinner," she said. "Not the safe house, not the West Loop with the table that appears by itself. Somewhere normal. Somewhere neither of us has an arrangement." A silence. "I don't know many places like that," he said. There was something in it that might, in a different register, have been the beginning of humor. "I do," she said. "There's a place on Dearborn that has good food and bad lighting, and you have to wait for a table like everyone else. I've never waited for a table. I know. She picked the spoon back up, turned the burner back on. That's why you should. The silence that followed was different from all the silences she had cataloged over 8 months. It had a quality she hadn't encountered in him before. Lightness. Actual lightness. The specific gravity shift that happens when a person who has been carrying something for a very long time sets it down somewhere and stands in the unfamiliar sensation of their own unweighted shoulders. Friday, he said. Friday, she agreed. She put the phone down and finished making dinner and ate it at the cleared table with no case files on it, and the refrigerator hummed, and outside the spring evening moved through the city doing what spring did, indifferent and renewing and relentless, in the way that only living things are relentless, not because they are trying, but because that is simply what they do. Bam. He came to the door on Friday. Not a car sent ahead. Not Marcus. Him, at the door, in a jacket she hadn't seen before that was slightly less formal than his usual. Still expensive, still precise, but with the collar unbuttoned in a way that suggested he had thought about it and made a decision. He looked at her doorway and then at her, and she saw him do the cataloging scan, exits, sight lines, and then she watched him consciously not do it, watched him make the choice to stand in a doorway like a person rather than a position. You look different, he said. I rearranged the furniture, she said. He looked past her at the apartment. Something moved in his face. The table, he said. No case files. No. He looked at her. That's not what I meant. She understood what he meant. The apartment looked like a place someone lived rather than a place someone survived. The distinction was not in the furniture. It was in the quality of the air, the things on the counter, the jacket thrown over the chair by the door. Her jacket, thrown there because she had come in and thrown it there without thinking about it, without calculating whether it projected the right image, without managing it at all. She had been in this apartment for 11 months and had never thrown her jacket over a chair until 3 weeks ago. Ready? She said. Yes, he said. They walked to the restaurant on Dearborn, which was 8 blocks, and it was a Friday evening in May, and the sidewalks were busy, and the city smelled like itself. Exhaust and river and food, and the distant cold edge of the lake, and she walked beside him without tracking exits for the first time in longer than she could accurately remember. She noticed that she wasn't tracking them the way you notice the absence of pain after a long illness. Not with relief, with something quieter, simple recognition. Oh, this is what it's like. He noticed she had stopped. He didn't comment. He walked beside her at the pace the sidewalk required, and he didn't reach for her arm, or manage her trajectory, or produce an umbrella, or make any of the arrangements he was capable of making, and the absence of arrangements was itself a form of attention, she thought, a form of trust. They waited 11 minutes for a table. He stood in the entrance of the restaurant and looked at the other people waiting and said nothing, which she suspected required more adjustment than it appeared to, and she stood beside him and looked at a menu posted on the wall and said, "The pasta is good. The risotto is better." "All right," he said. "You've never just ordered from a menu, have you?" A beat. "I've ordered from menus. At your own restaurants." He stopped. "The risotto," he said. She laughed. It came out easily, without effort, and she noticed the ease of it the same way she had noticed the jacket over the chair, as evidence of something returning that she had not known was gone. His face, when she looked at him, had the light-through-water quality at full strength, unhidden, and he looked like a man who had been handed something he had no rehearsed way to receive and had decided to receive it without rehearsal. "You laughed," he said. "I've laughed before." "Not like that," he said. "Simple. Not a compliment. Just an observation, accurate and unembellished, the way he always said the things that landed." The table came. They sat. They ate risotto that was exactly as good as she had said it would be, and they talked about her caseload, which had gone through a period of necessary neglect and was now being rebuilt with the specific deliberation of someone who understood that her work was not incidental to her identity, but constitutive of it. And they talked about his organization, more of it this time, examined rather than edited. And she listened with the same quality she brought to cases, thorough, without rushing to conclusions, interested in the shape of the whole rather than just the presentable parts. He talked about his father once, briefly, something specific she hadn't heard before. and she talked about her adolescence in the same register. Specific, not performed, the real thing, rather than the managed version of it. At some point, she became aware that 2 hours had passed and she had not thought about Travis Hale once. Not avoidance, not suppression. Simply the way time passes in the company of someone who occupies enough of your attention that the old obsessive monitoring, the exit tracking, the threat assessment, the constant recalibration of safety, simply doesn't find purchase. She sat with the recognition for a moment. "What?" Lorenzo said. He had noticed the pause. "I forgot to be afraid," she said. He looked at her. "Was that bad?" "No." She picked up her water glass. "It was just noticeable. I've been afraid for so long that not being afraid requires attention." She set the glass down. "I'll get used to it." "Yes," he said. "You will." Not reassurance. Not a promise. A statement of fact from a man who had assessed the evidence and arrived at a conclusion and saw no reason to dress it up in anything softer than the truth. She had learned, over 8 months, that this was the most reliable form of comfort he offered, and she had learned, more slowly, that it was also the rarest. Most people offered softness instead of accuracy, and softness felt better in the moment and helped less in the long run. She thought about standing on a curb in a cold rain with headlights expanding toward her, and the arm that came from nowhere, and the business card with nothing on it but a name. She thought about what it had cost him to be careful, and what it had cost them both when he stopped being careful, and what it had cost her to stop protecting a man who had never protected anything but his own need, and what it had cost her to stand in a courtroom and say all of it out loud in the level voice she used for case reports. She thought about the 12 pages on the legal pad and the cereal in the jacket over the chair. She thought about everything that had been taken and everything that had been returned and everything that had been built in the space between, built badly and rebuilt, held together not with the architecture of safety she had tried to construct alone in a third-floor apartment with good locks and bad heating, but with something messier and more load-bearing, honesty, and 2 people who had chosen, repeatedly, in difficult circumstances, to be honest with each other, even when the honest thing was not the easy thing. "I want to ask you something," she said. "Yes." "The night at the intersection, when you pulled me out of the road." She held his gaze. "Were you following me? Or was it actually chance?" The pause was long. She waited through it. "I was on my way to a meeting," he said. 2 blocks north. I was late." He looked at the table, then back at her. "That intersection, the light. You were the only person moving in the wrong direction, and I saw it before I understood what I was seeing." He was quiet for a moment. "I've thought about it a great deal, whether it was anything other than physics and timing. And I think," he said slowly, "that it was exactly what it appeared to be. 2 people in the same place. Rain, bad timing for you, and, as it turned out, very particular timing for me." He paused. "I don't have a better explanation than that." She nodded. She believed him. She had always believed him, even when she hadn't trusted him, which was a distinction she had spent months untangling, and had finally, somewhere in the 13 days at the Streeterville apartment, resolved. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They walked back to her building in the May evening, which had cooled to the temperature that Chicago evenings reached when they were actually pleasant rather than grudgingly tolerable. And at the door of her building, he stopped and she stopped, and the city did its unremarkable ongoing thing around them. "Friday was good," he said. "Yes," she said. "It was. I'd like there to be a next Friday." She looked at him, at the gray eyes and the old scar and the collar still unbuttoned, at the face that had been through weather and was in the process, she thought, of experiencing a different kind of weather now, the kind that didn't require preparation, only presence. "There will be," she said. He nodded. He didn't reach for her. He stood in the doorway of her building like a person rather than a position, and she looked at him for a moment, and then she went inside and up the stairs and into her apartment where the furniture was rearranged and the table was clear and the jacket was over the chair. She didn't track exits. She made tea. She actually drank this time. She sat on the couch where a case file used to live and looked out the window at the street below, at the ordinary Friday night movement of the city, and she breathed, in and out, the 4-count she had taught the teenager in Uptown, the one who had started going back to school 3 weeks ago. She was not healed. She knew enough about how human beings actually work to understand that what had happened to her over the last year did not resolve in a courtroom or a May evening or a dinner where someone ordered risotto for the first time without prior arrangement. She would have difficult nights. She would track exits sometimes without meaning to. She would carry certain textures of fear longer than she wanted to, the way you carry muscle memory of pain in a place that is healed. The ghost of the thing, present and fading, present and fading. But she was here, in the apartment she had come back to and rearranged and put cereal in and thrown her jacket over a chair in, and outside was May, and the city ran on, and somewhere 2 blocks north was an intersection where a woman had nearly died, and a man had made a decision in less than a second that had changed the geometry of both their lives, and neither of them had planned it, and it had cost them both more than they had expected, and they had paid it anyway, and here they were, still here. The refrigerator hummed. She finished her tea. She did not listen for footsteps in the hallway.